Hello and welcome to a next edition of our Communication Zoom talk. And we are very happy, Hartmut and I are very happy today that we have Alexey Grigoriev with us, a good friend from the good old Siemens times, let me put it that way. He lives and works in the field of communications in Moscow. And we will take the opportunity to discuss together about communications in critical times. And before we get into that, let me say a few words. All of us who are here are against war. All of us feel with all the victims of war, and all of us want war to end as quick as possible. Besides that, as communicators, besides all the actual suffering, one thing concerns us too, and that is how can fruitful communications happen in times like these, and even more, how can it build bridges for fruitful communications in the future? And there are a few prerequisites, let me put it that way, that I would like to share with you before we enter into the discussion. First, every single situation is unique. Individuals are individuals, and therefore there's no such thing like group or tribe liability. It is without doubt true to condemn war and its consequences, but it couldn't be more wrong to condemn all members of a people, especially if you want to live in a future where dialogue is still or again possible. That was important for us to mention before we enter into the discussion. And now I start with a very open question to the two folks. How important is it to keep in touch in critical times? Alexey, the first word to you.
Yes, thanks, guys. I believe that in critical times it's even more important to have communication rather than in normal times, yes, because actual critical times appear, in my view, then when communication failed, but it's then communication back again to fix things and to straighten them out and to find a solution, yes. So actually, I think that critical times are actually times for increased communication. It's more sophisticated, I would say. It's more sensitive. You have to be more efficient, more thoughtful about what and how you are doing. But nevertheless, I would say critical times is really the times of communication. And actually, you should try to put it on first place rather than let guns talk.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Hartmut.
Yeah, I would fully subscribe to this, Alexey, what you said. That is even more important. And in critical times, we see a lot of people then hide away from the communication, actually. And that's part of the problem, I would say, yeah? Because enter in an active communication, enter in a dialogue, following some dialogue principles like we already talked about, with active listening and also appreciating actually then also contrary positions, and use the communication to come to a new solution, because that's, as I would say, the real power of communication. And this aspect, I would say, is even more important when it really gets tough and critical, yeah? Like we have now on the societal level, but it's also true in business, I would say. So my advice would be never to hide away, but to approach communication actively.
Yeah, and I agree completely, especially what you said, Alexey, that the more critical the times are, the more important communication becomes. I'm truly convinced of that as well. And I had in my learning phase, let me put it that way, where times were not at all that critical, that are the white elephant in our room. but that were critical times for the company I worked with, and I was a press officer at that time. And then there was another, so to say, corporate crisis, and I moaned a bit too loud. And then my CEO said, "Mr. Derber, why are you moaning? Why should I need a press officer if not for times of crisis?" And that was pretty much true, I would say. It's something that I really kept in my mind. Of course, it's a little bit different because you have to build up good relationships with your stakeholders in the good times in order to be able to have strong relationships in critical times. That's one of the other learnings that I had, and that leads to the next starting point for reflection. Let me put it that way: how can we really enable that keeping in touch, keeping in dialogue on the business level in critical times? What comes to your mind there?
I think that first of all, you have to make a clear planning or a clear concept of what and how you want to communicate. Yes, actually, first of all is really to define your target groups and the communication goals that you want to achieve with the communication to respective target groups. If I was in a business, I would say that you have different target groups. You have, let's say, a clear division, internal target groups, external target groups. They are different inside the company and outside the company. You have to understand what are the specifics, what you expect by communications to achieve from different target groups. What are the messages that you want to deliver? You have to find appropriate ways. How do you want to deliver? What are the channels, the appropriate channels? Yes. Not all the channels might be public, for example, yes, but nevertheless you have to keep the communication upright. Then you have another challenge in communications because in critical times situation is changing fast. So that means that you have to be very flexible and very sensitive to what is going on and adapt yourself constantly to what is going on. And actually, at the end of the day, you have really to also watch that the communication you're running, both against all target groups versus all the target groups, that it must be holistic. It must be one story. Yes, it must be one stories with different facets, with different aspects. But nevertheless, you tell a story that is upright, that you can really present as your own. It must be credible. It must be based on facts, on values, on certain activities from the company that you represent, and be credible. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's
So
a nutshell, very, very roughly, but what actually is needed in terms of critical communication.
if I hear you talking, I would say what you describe is so to say the ultimate proof test for successful communications. Let me put it that way. So because what you have been mentioning are the things that that we communicators always say that are important. And not all of us communicators, let me put it that way, implement that all the time. And all of a sudden you are in a critical phase, and then this becomes a very, very blunt truth, let me put it that way, that these things have to be done and have to be followed.
Sure, but you also must be, as I already said, very sensitive to what is going on. Yes. Yes. So it's not that you made your plan or I don't know your communication planning once and then you run it through the whole crisis. You must be very adaptive. Yes, here. And actually, the current times, the current developments in international affairs show that this is really very much afforded. Yes, and unfortunately, not all the parties are ready to show such a flexibility and adaptiveness.
Yeah. which is another point, which is leading to the theory of communications. That is, if you want to enter into a dialogue, you have to make sure that your counterpart is ready to enter into the dialogue as well, because otherwise you have a hard time.
Or you try to bring him into a position that he is ready to accept. Yes.
Yeah, that is
not in this way. Like perhaps it might sound that by means of use of force, but by means of communication. Yes.
yes.
You have to
Yes,
involve
indeed.
people. It must be an involving communication, something that embraces and actually doesn't let you any chance but to communicate, even if you are not very much attributed to this. Yes.
So don't stop communicating, even if there's no immediate sign of readiness for dialogue, but you hope that you will get such a sign by continuing your efforts for dialogue. Very good point. Another thing that came into my mind and that I would like to ask Hartmut for comment is to be flexible and sensitive and adaptive to situations. Isn't that something that we were told is a reason for introducing agile working?
Sure. I think there's a direct link between adaptive ways of working and the VUCA world, so to speak, and agile working somehow was presented as the answer towards the VUCA world, which is when we are in situations of volatility, of uncertainty, of complexity, and also this ambiguity, and all of this I think we find in the current situation. Yeah? So what I wanted to add to the discussion is I think in this agile ways of working and to ensure this adaptiveness, I think it's also important then to have a focus on direct communication. So also look at this from a perspective that maybe goes beyond the traditional corporate communication, so beyond sending a press release or posting something on social media. And for the communicator, I think this means in these critical situations also to become more like a coach, to act like a coach to senior management, also for other stakeholders, for the parties that might be in conflict. So it could be about them asking the right questions, for example, and bringing in this adaptiveness through asking questions. So this might be a way forward, and to also prove the value of communications in such a situation, I would say.
Alexey, you are nodding.
Yeah, I'm nodding because actually asking questions is a good means to involve somebody into communications. Yes. But actually, what came to my mind also that in times of crisis, you have to perhaps to segment your target groups even deeper than usually. Yes, because really you have to make some fine tuning in communications and what and how you deliver messages and try to engage in communications with the different target groups, subgroups, subgroups, and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe in critical times, it goes even further that your target groups and sub-target groups may suddenly be on another spot on the opinion landscape, yeah, while a crisis continues. So you start with stakeholder group A being on, I don't know, on the east side of the opinion map, and all of a sudden they are in the northwest or different. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So that means that you may need something like a special team, not to use the word force, a special team meeting very regularly to make sure that you don't lose hold of this of the situation. Is that true?
Of course, yes. Actually, it can be done by agile or non-agile team, whatever. But actually, this communication inside the communication team is also quite critical. Yes, yes, and actually, this communication has to embrace not only the communication team. Actually, usually in types of crisis, you set up communication crisis teams that comprise communication, but they also comprise, I don't know, production, sales, marketing, PR and GR and whatever. And then actually you legal, other relevant functions. So actually, all of them must be then encompassed in a crisis team that actually can really then quickly align what and how is communicated. Yes, and actually come to a let's say one voice communication and holistic communication, uh, fragmented and adjusted as to different target groups and subgroups. Yes, but this communication inside the communication team or crisis team must be there too. Yes, and that's, by the way, also a very specific line of communications inside the company. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. I would expect human resources be part of the crisis team as well,
I
because
didn't mention resources. I didn't mention finance and
yeah, I know. I just wanted to build a bridge for me to communication with employees, because in critical situations there is, of course, uncertainty amongst the employees, and I would say one of the targets probably is, or from my point of view, should be to reduce uncertainty as far as possible. Uh, of course, there is situations where you can not reduce uncertainty to zero, but in critical times as well, or even more in critical times, it is the task of a company and the communications of a company to give orientation. Is that true?
Mark, I couldn't agree more. Actually, certainty and uncertain times is also always valuable. Yes, and for employees, especially in crisis times when they feel that their work, their life, their income is really under risks. It is of great value, of greatest value, to give some sense of certainty. On the other hand, you're absolutely right saying that you cannot always do so and actually provide certainty. But at least, if I may play with the words a little bit, you may provide some certainty that the company knows that still much uncertainty, but strives to settle this. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
and at least really what you said, a sense of orientation, a sense of the company understanding what it's doing, how it's doing, where to go to. Actually, it is also valuable to present risks in a very open manner. Yes, and show different scenarios how it might develop is in case there are such opportunities for presenting these. But as I already said, there is no recipe for all, because it's of course should be structured for different target groups. Yes, because for example, with the top management of a company, you may be more open, more precise in such evaluations. With the big bulk of the personnel of the company, especially if it's a big company, then you should be more general, of course, but giving them a sense of direction, giving them a sense of or understanding that the company management understands what is the situation, what are the risks, what the company management is undertaking in order to settle the crisis for the company, and so on. Yeah? So, but it's
So
really structured and different as to target groups.
yeah, sure, sure. So it is. Uh, it needs first of all valuation of the employees as individuals that need to be informed. Then it's honesty in describing the situation. Yeah. And this honesty leads to being perceived, hopefully, as authentic, and that leads to what you mentioned in the beginning, to be perceived as credible. And credibility, I think, is a very strong currency, let me put it that way, especially in critical times.
And don't forget, the communication is always two ways. It's not a one-way activity.
Yeah.
So actually, getting leaving the employees the opportunity to place questions and get answers for them. Of course, not all the questions may be answered very exactly and strictly, yes, but nevertheless, people should understand that they are talking and they are understood. The questions are well received, yes, and they are paid attention to, yes. And this is very, very valuable for the people. Also, to get them a little more feel a sense of certainty than usual.
Yeah.
So this just brings to my mind, Mark, these terms of trust and transparency again that we talked about for a while. So on the one hand side, to create this transparency, even if it's a difficult time, and I fully agree. Alexey, also was you said that people need to learn to bear and to understand the risks that are associated in such situations. But transparency, I think, it's the clue to maintain the trust and with all the target groups, whether it's the employees or customers or top management. And once we come there and can maintain this transparency, I think we get well ahead and can make a move and really make the impact then for a company, even in difficult times. And I think as communicators, we should somehow be like the stakeholders of trust somehow in this situation where it might feel a bit difficult for others maybe to create transparency. But as communicators, we can pay attention to it all the time, actually.
And these two values or points, trust and transparency, in my point of view, are prerequisites to be fast or quick enough to adapt and react. Because if one of both is missing, then reaction time would be much longer than if you are transparent. You know that you do transparent communications within the company, then people can trust in the dialogue and the information that is distributed as facts, and you can quicker adapt to the new situation and find ways to get better along during a critical situation.
Yeah. And we should not forget that even in issues when you don't have any certainty so far, yes, but nevertheless you can create a sense of trust, yes, and some confidence by referring, for example, to previous experiences with similar situations, yes. And when you bring some success examples, yes, like you mastered a crisis in the past, or some difficult situation in your own previous life, then you actually may also raise kind of trust as a leader that actually you faced already a couple of such critical situations and managed them. So that's so that the new situation that came up would be not an exemption of this. Yeah. So actually not having answers to all the questions, but nevertheless, based on experience from the past, you may create such a sense of confidence. That's true.
Very good and very important. Yeah. Because how could you proceed without at least a minimum of confidence in the stability of your living situation?
Absolutely. Okay, but it's communication is difficult in difficult times, but very much afforded. Yes.
And another question, a professional question: do you have the impression, Alexey, that communications gets more valued the more critical a situation is?
I cannot say for sure that it's valued consciously, but I'm sure that even unconsciously it has to be valued, yes, because actually it brings results, yes. It brings very tangible results once you embark on an efficient, flexible, and relevant communication. Then actually you can produce good results that are visible in the company, even more as in normal times. Yes, because decisions have to be made, everything is running faster, and the results you get are really practical. Yes, not just in terms of making another survey or brand measuring or whatever, but then you can really see practical outcomes. Yes, and this is of course very valuable. And once communication has in a company has survived in critical times, I guess it has a good basis for the future.
I would guess so, and I keep all my fingers crossed for you. And since I know that you are a highly professional communicator, I have no doubt that you will reach that. My personal experience was in company critical situations, again, not societal, company critical situations that, yes, things had to be decided much quicker, much faster. And yes, suddenly the communicators stood in the forefront to take decisions because there were some people you would have never expected that took a step back. That was at least my experience in several situations. Still, I enjoyed it because then I knew that that my, as you said, my professional expertise and experience really came into play, without doubt.
Yes, professional expertise from your side, but it's also very important that you can rely on professional communications teams. Yes, because it's really work, and this team has to be organized. Also, inside your communication team, you have to create certainties about who is doing what is the scope of freedom to act on self, because not all the activities can be released by the manager. So actually it's also about more delegating, but you can delegate and actually rely once you know that you have professionals in your teams. And this is very important to build it up, let's say in normal times, yes, in order to make sure that this can function also in crisis times.
Great point. Great point. This is another prerequisite to be able to act flexible and quick. Because if you do not delegate responsibility, you are, especially in crisis times, you are all of a sudden such a bottleneck that nothing may continue. So yes, I agree completely. It's so important to delegate responsibility to those who know what to do.
Yeah, to delegate responsibility and to have a kind of process at least in place for such crisis. So this is one of the things that I remember from my times when we had business crisis and had actually a kind of process how to activate and the contacts, how to get in touch with the lawyers, with the business people, and then this also helps really to speed up then the results and to really have a communication available that can then resolve the issue. Of course, depending on the size of the issue, it might not be all, but things that pop up suddenly, this aspect also helped, definitely.
But it's important that you create this delegation culture before the crisis, yes? Because building something new inside the crisis, it's even more difficult, yes? So actually this culture of delegation should be lived every day, on an everyday basis. And second, actually, by the way, what comes to my mind is also prioritization, yes? You have to set priorities. In the normal times, outside the crisis, you can go for anything that might be also nice to have. In crisis times, you have to focus on must have, and actually then really set priorities and say this is beyond the scope of our activities for the time being, and we are focused now on certain things, and you identify these things. Yes.
Perfect. I couldn't say it differently. Perfect. And one point I would like to add is to focus or to have priorities, like you put it, is not only valid for critical times. It is something that should be, so to say, saved into normal times work as well. Because I learned such a lot about communications of now many companies during my freelance phase of more than 10 years now, that a lot of communication gets lost and does not have any effect because people are not able to prioritize or focus. And therefore, to prioritize or focus is something that should be a guiding principle, not only in critical times, but in normal times as well, which I would really keep my fingers crossed for you and all your folks that will come rather sooner than later back to normal.
Yeah, I hope so too, yes. But actually, when we talk about communication in crisis time, so it's some abridged communication from normal times. Yes, in normal times, you can plan. It depends upon the interaction of the communication team with the management of the company, how this is taken, how this is perceived. What are the specific wishes of the management? Because sometimes the management has
Okay.
its own ideas about how to shape communication. But once you have really nicely planned, thoroughly planned communication that is holistic, that is really logic in its in general, and the management buys it, the more efficient you are in communication. Yes, and then you actually don't have escapades like some general managers like to have it. Yes, when they have communications that is not working on a planned basis. Yes, or on a conceptual basis. That's my experience.
Yeah, I heard that such things happen from time to time. I even remember that.
It's really condensed, but once you build up efficient communications in normal time, you can actually build on this fundament and actually go with a good, efficient communication through the crisis times too.
Thank you very much. I think that was a great summary and a great final word. Let's keep in touch. Let's continue our dialogue. So let's come together soon. And until then, all the best and good luck for the success of your communications in your situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and it was nice to see you both, guys. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.